some of my favorite DJs, so I get notifications when they're on, like Jazzy Jeff or whoever, and I'll be like, oh shit, he's on, and then I'll yeah, he's like he's old school, but fuck, he's still my favorite.
Yeah.
And I'll just Chromecast it to the TV, and so he's on TV, the music's in the lounge, the kids come and go, I'm cooking brunch, whatever, you know, and he's on.
What a start! Jesse Jeff.
Yeah, man. He's still like
Here we are ready to talk about film, and you drop that bomb first thing.
Well, we're probably that generation.
We're going that generation.
Yeah.
We're going that way.
But I still like I listen to a lot of party DJs that just do different genres or whatever. But he's just the master, not just technically, but also he's got no fear. Like he'll just jump to any genre. Like of course he's a hip hop DJ and he's a party DJ, but the next thing you know, he's like bringing in Phil Collins or like the fucking Beatles into Snoop Dogg or what. He's all over the place. You know.
That's right.
He's great.
OG, Mr. Pete, that one, eh?
I grew up in that era with hip hop.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am down with Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Can I ask how old you are, Pete?
I'm 47.
Okay, I'm 52, so we're similar.
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look great for 47, by
Thank
the way.
you. So
There you go. I won't mention my age because you guys look so good. So I'll keep it cool. I'll keep it cool.
Yeah.
Man, cool that you started with hip hop, because one of the things that I read from your bio, and then I had a look and I was like, oh, there you go. Scribe Doko.
Yeah.
Hey.
amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it was special project.
Yeah.
How did they come about? What was the thing? Did you go after? Or did they come to you? Or did you know him?
No, I've known him a long time. So it came really organically. Like I wasn't like, I should tell his story. Oh, and saying that, actually, I did read, I mean, he's often in the headlines and a lot of the headlines are completely unfair and, like they're just clickbait. But when the headline was that he had gone to rehab and he was going sober and he was going to work on his new album, I was like, oh, fuck. This would make a great story, you know? And it was right in the midst of, I was doing a series for Radio New Zealand, like a video documentary series called Stand Up, a history of New Zealand hip hop. And we were doing little 8-minute episodes on a particular song and the story behind the song, how it came about. And we were interviewing the rappers of that time, as now, obviously, and some of them are as old school as Upper Heart Posse, Air 2, and the first single, really, let alone bilingual single, So yeah, we were doing a lot of those stories, and we were doing one on the song Stand Up, which I'd done the video for, and they were like, oh cool, we're going to send the runner out to pick up Scribe from the airport. And I was like, I haven't seen him in 10 years. Like I'll go pick him up. Like it'll just benefit on camera that we can whatever, And so I picked him up and we, connected and had bonded, and he had literally just been kind of hiding, with his meth addiction, still writing songs, but just in a dark place for a long time. And that's when I kind of said, bro, would you consider, doing this? And kind of pitched it to him. And he's like, yeah, actually, I started making a documentary and the wheels fell off and I realized I got to do it with somebody I trust. And I've known you for 20 years. Like, I think I've done 6 music videos for Scribe, so I've known him a long time. But just with that giant gap where he didn't really see anybody. And he went through rehab in Dunedin and came out the other side. And so we applied for funding and got it. And, told a beautiful story, far more powerful and it had much greater reverberations and echoes than I imagined, very, very powerful project. Yeah.
I guess we hear a lot about the music stars, like the people who get into some dark paths in life. But we're talking about an industry that, one of our guests once said it can be the devil's playground. Is it something that also affects like people behind the scenes? Like when, that if you're not paying attention, you're in that party mode and then you're enjoying all the productions, but then the crew meets, like, is it something that affects everyone? You got to be mindful, or you think it's a main thing with the main characters of the industry, like the ones in front of the camera?
You mean in terms of like how they might turn to addiction or just substance abuse within the industry? Yeah. I mean, I think it's there in hardworking long hours, but it's not. I don't think it necessarily goes with film and TV the way that maybe it goes with music. And I suspect for Scribe and a lot of musicians, and I guess any artist in any form that turn to it, it's more of a, it's self-medicating and suppressing, the pain or the trauma that they're having, which is, I guess, for artists, usually a response to the height of fame and then the crash of falling afterwards, which is probably what happened for Scribe. Like, #1 biggest single of New Zealand song of all time with Stand Up, and one of the biggest, #1 single and album simultaneously, which had never been done before. So he broke all the records and he was like a hero and he was like the king of hip hop, and then he crashed, so but as you see in the documentary, it's not as simple as like, the fame made him go to drugs. It's he had like generational trauma that came through his dad, and levels of demons that he was fighting throughout his childhood. So I think the fame was unexpected, but then that's a massive weight for anybody of any background to carry and then have to digest without any tools or skills,
And how cool for us as audience, especially for someone like you, it's like grew up listening to that music, and then you understand what someone is going through, eh?
Oh yeah. I think that artists have that little. There's a lot of trauma in artists, like whether it's painting or film, actors. There's something always behind the scenes that nobody sees, and when something happens, people like the media just smack them down and. It's terrible.
It is terrible.
Yeah,
no, it's challenging.
Yeah,
and you're kind of like if that defines you, like if your art and your success as an artist is your identity that you kind of lean on or rely on, then it's really challenging if that dries up or changes, or you're not the flavor of the month anymore or whatever. I mean, I've been there myself, like I've had my heights in film, movies, and also in advertising, the advertising game. And I was like the cool kid for a while, and then suddenly, it's like I was asking for work. So it's like it comes and goes. That's the nature of, I guess, being an artist. But how you view it and how you choose to respond to that, I guess, is is your own navigation.
Yeah.
But again, if you don't know how, you got to figure it out, and that's probably the journey for most of us as artists, really.
Man. So you are one of the biggest film and TV director from Aotearoa, New Zealand. You've done a lot of things that reverberated overseas as well, and I guess for a lot of people is like when you're not in the industry, you just see the names, right? Directed by.
Yeah.
There's so much glamour. There's so much like, wow, the director, like, and people have, my favorite director or whatever because of the style. But something that you said when we were talking about, I want to go and I want to go and talk to Scribe. I want to pick him up because that story, I want to tell that story. Can you explain to us a little bit of like the role, because most people will know, there's someone who writes the script, there's the storyteller, but then not necessarily that guy is the director. Sometimes it happens that they do both, right? But like for someone who has no clue about it, like what's your role when you get that story to tell that, to put your character in it, and how do you relate to the person who wrote that story?
Good question. I guess the short answer is it's interpretation. Like somebody will write, and it works for, it could be advertising, like they write a TV script and it's like, we want you to direct this. Like, how do you see it? Essentially what it is. So it comes down to interpretation and vision. Same experience for me making music videos. Like often artists will be like, I got this track, could you make a video for it? And they're like, I got this idea. I was like, hey, please don't tell me your idea. Can I just go home and listen to it and have my own? And then we'll hook up and I'll tell you mine and you tell me yours and we'll see if we can amalgamate them or whatever. Generally artists just trust me and don't think visually, they think in terms of music or thematically or lyrically or melodically or whatever. So they trust me to just do it. But I guess music videos is one example. I'll go home and I'll put on AirPods or on the stereo, turn it up loud, usually in the dark, close my eyes and just see what I see in my mind and my imagination while I listen to it, like what comes to me. And more often than not, the first idea I have is the strongest idea. Even if I push myself and go, that's a good idea, is there a better one? Go again, and try and come up with a different concept. I could come up with other concepts, but actually the first one is usually the truest one.
Feeling.
Yeah. It comes out of you for a reason. It's amazing. Like that, I guess that, the creative, nucleus of an idea, But getting back to your question, it's kind of you if somebody else writes a screenplay or a TV series or whatever, it's a script form in whatever way, I guess you read it and the way you imagine it in your brain, which is probably very similar for everybody when they read a novel. You know, like you read a book and then you imagine it, and that's why people love literature, right? So I guess in essence, a director imagines and has a vision of how they would do it or what they see in their mind, and then the skill and part of the technique and responsibility is to then communicate to a crew of people how to make it the way they want it best they can, and still being open to collaborate with other people's ideas, and that you know, layering an idea with somebody that's very talented, whether it's a cinematographer and an editor or a costume designer or a composer. You know, if you're open to their ideas, chances are it's going to be better than what you could come up with alone, and that's why it's such a collaborative art form. You know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are the editors the nightmare of the directors? Chop this part off. Get rid of it.
It's the hardest job.
They come in there with the knives. No, it's usually. I love the editing process and post-production because it's kind of like you've got all the material and now you've got to sculpt it down to its purest form of what you imagined or what you both think it should be, and sometimes how long it has to be if you're dealing with distributors for, you know, feature films or movie theaters, or a music video, the song is that long, or a TV commercial is 30 seconds or 60 seconds. So there are restrictions, but you know, shooting in production is often quite hectic. Like it takes I've developed over decades, I guess, like everybody coming to you with questions and even ideas like, hey, why don't you do such and such? It's like, oh, that's a really cool idea. Let me think about it. But kind of like, thank you, no thank you, which is usually clients and advertising or whatever. Like they want to play chef, but they've hired you to be the chef.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so, it can often be really hectic, and there's so many decisions, and time is pressure, and the sun's going down, and time is money. So it's like you've got to be as efficient and effective as possible. It can be quite overwhelming and also really exciting. And but to try and be creative while all of that noise is going on is hard. And then when you go to the edit, you like sit in the chair next to them, or you sit on the couch by the TV or whatever, and you can just calmly get in the zone of the essence of what you're trying to make. And without all of that noise and pressure, I feel like it's almost like the polar opposite to shooting on set and being in production. You know, it's like a very calm, zen, creative space. Yeah.
How are you with your editing process? Speaking of things
It's not calm. It's not calm.
Why? What's your deal?
Oh, I see what I want when I shoot it.
Yeah.
And then telling the story, I love telling the story. I love seeing on the timeline and moving things around and feeling that story come. But sometimes it takes me so long to get through that process.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love the end result. I love I love seeing people's faces when they see their stories and they're like, whoa.
Yeah. Makes it worth it,
Getting that feeling, yeah. Telling people stories and them not even imagining how they'll feel when they'll see it. And then they see it and they're like, yeah. So you must have felt that a lot.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. As you were saying it, it made me think like, fuck, that's the dopamine. Yeah. Like, that's why we keep doing it. Yeah. And I guess for a musician, the crowd's like, and you're like, whoa, I feel like a god or whatever. Yeah. And then they need that fix and they need to go back and do it again because they want that feeling, which I guess is like, you know, the highs of gambling or drugs or whatever else. Yeah. But it's like, for us, it's like if the audience responds. Like even when I made Sione's, I went,
classic.
I went into the theatre a couple of times by myself. Like I went to St. Luke's in Auckland and sat in the back and just sat there. And when I heard the laughter, like it's the best feeling. It's like, fuck, I just made hundreds of people laugh and they don't even know I'm sitting here.
We're
you know,
still quoting that movie last week at work with the boys.
Oh, really?
It's such a classic, man. It's so funny.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that was also a real privilege. It was amazing. Yeah.
The sixth biggest, how did you say the gross earnings from the country is the sixth one, right?
The sixth, I think it's the sixth highest New Zealand film, box office film within New Zealand, of all time.
Sione's Wedding.
And I think it's still the biggest opening weekend. I could be wrong, but I think, in all respect to Taika, who we used to be friends, and he was at my high school. We used to skate together, and we went to Sundance together. And Taika came along and broke records, But I think Sione's, and it's really interesting because you may not know, Leo, but at the time there was actually a piracy issue where the DVD got leaked into South Auckland, and so there was a lot of speculation that it would kill the movie, and there was like estimated $1 million in loss and that kind of thing. But actually, I think it was like street distribution, and it created this hype, especially in the Samoan community. But everybody was talking about it before it even dropped in the cinema. So it was almost like this, street whispers happening. And then the movie opened, and everybody that had seen it on DVD wanted to take their uncles and aunties and cousins or family or friends or girlfriends and go. So the opening weekend was like a smash.
Could you tell that it would be a success? Like, of course, when you're working on it, you're already expecting big and you're putting all your efforts. But like, could you visualize that? You're like, fuck, this is going to be massive, man. Could you tell?
No. I'll be honest with you, I couldn't. I mean, I was proud of it, but I had no barometer of how it was going to be received. And to be honest, like it was made through South Pacific Pictures, and they had been developing it for years and basically trying to get the Film Commission to give them the money to make it for years. And they'd already made Wild Rider and massive catalogue of films. And my take on it, which could be inaccurate, but I think there was a real hesitance. Would non-Samoans find it funny? Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, the Naked Samoan Boys have been developing Brotown, and that hit TV. Yeah. And Brotown came out, and that was such a success that I think that proved to the Film Commission that there was an audience, like that it was Kiwi humour. Yeah. And just like there's nuances of Māori humour, there's nuances of Samoan humour, but it's infectious enough that everybody loved it. Yeah. And so I think Brotown justified it getting made, and then we made it. But there was still a lot of whispers and rumours that the movie was going to suck. Like before I screened it. Yeah, and exactly. Yeah. It was just that attitude. Like the haters were there and ready initially. Yeah. And then when it opened up, and again, I think the DVD leak did nothing but great things for it. But it just got embraced, and I guess it was like, there wasn't many comedies. Like Taika came along, but prior to that, there wasn't a lot of New Zealand comedies. Like there was Came a Hot Friday, and Scarface was kind of a comedy thriller, but comedy, like we'd kind of made a lot of TV cringe comedy, like skits and bad comedy. So I think the boys and I just had a great time making it, and I think the process of making it, and also absolute credit to them, but their chemistry as a comedy troupe. So the Naked Samoans had already been to Edinburgh and done theatre, and they were all best friends with old history. So their chemistry on screen was there, and I was just lucky enough to be the palangi to jump in there and have fun with them, and they trusted me, Yeah.
Did you say that you went to school with
Taika Waititi? Yeah.
What was in the water at school? What was happening?
I think his water was the East Coast. My water was Welly, but he grew up on the East Coast, and then midway through high school, I think his whānau and his mum moved to Wellington, and he came to Onslow College, where I went to school, which is, a co-ed kind of artistic school, non-uniform school, pretty relaxed. A lot of kids fell through the cracks, but there was a lot of arts and support there. So. I don't know. We just, if you were driven and you loved making stuff, like I was doing a lot of different things in the arts back then. I was just an enthusiastic young teenager with the world ahead of me. So, like, I wanted to make films, but I didn't know how. And I was doing graffiti art all over town because I was involved in hip hop, and I was skateboarding, and I started up the theatre sports group at school, and I was trying to start up a radio station. Like, I was just hungry,
active.
This is what I want to know, how a Wellington kid ends up in New York City.
Fortunate privilege, I guess, really. So basically I grew up in Welly, and I got involved. Well, it's actually the hip hop side's got really nothing to do with New York, but in short, my dad, we had a very privileged upbringing, and not in wealth, but in experience. So my dad was a diplomat when we were kids. So we got posted overseas a lot. And if that was the first part of his career. And then when he left the diplomatic service, he was working for a non-profit organization. And my parents had split when I was about 17 years old. And my mum was a social worker and a counsellor, and my dad was running a non-profit organisation. He took a job in New York. So just when I was in 17 last year of high school, I was planning to go to ILM in Christchurch, but there was only one teacher and one Bolex, like the wind-up 16mm camera, and that was it. And I knew that how much am I really going to learn? And he was living in New York, so he's like, well, do you want to come and live with me? Do you want to apply to film school in New York? So I got the high school, went and had a meeting with the principal and begged him for the high school VHS camera. And I went home on weekend and made a short film with shooting on a VHS camera and then editing with 2 VHS machines, like play, record, pause, rewind. Oh, shit. Oh, the tapes, like all the lines, everything. Yep. And I made a short film and applied and got into School of Visual Arts and NYU. And my dad was there, so he's like, you can live with me. And so I was 18 years old, like straight out of high school, nervous and excited as hell.
What
like,
an opportunity.
Totally. Because I grew up in hip hop in Wellington in the late 80s, it was Mecca. It was like the Mecca of hip hop and the Mecca of film. And there I am, 18 and wide-eyed and scared and excited and ready, but nervous, and had a blast. Like I just soaked it up.
Did you have one of those crazy encounters with a star in New York that you were like, what? What's this?
So many. so many. I've met, I know, this sounds pretentious. I've met so many famous people, and just because they're there, like I'm not like, I hang with whoever, I know whoever. It's like I was
just there?
Yeah, when I was a camera assistant, I remember walking out of a building, and it was like Mike Myers was walking in the building as I was walking out, and I opened up the door, and a little game I used to play is I'd always act like I kind of knew them. So I'd be like, oh, hey, Mike, how's it going? And he'd be like, oh, good, buddy, how are you? And he'd be looking at me with this expression of like, fuck, is this the studio's executive's son? Like he didn't know why I was acting that way. And I'm like, I'm really good, thanks. Yeah, like, you busy? He's like, oh, I got some projects on. I'm like, cool, well, good luck with that. Okay, I'll see you later. And he kind of had that dazed look in his eyes, like, do I know him or not? Yeah. And I did that with, just everybody, Busta Rhymes, Dustin Hoffman, met Cindy Crawford, like, fuck Dalai Lama, like, lots of people.
Did you work with any of those guys, or it was just a thing of
working around them? Yeah. So when I came out of film school in New York, I became a camera. At first I was a production assistant, just a runner, and then I wanted to be in the camera department because I love cinematography, and so I became a camera assistant, and so often like the VH1 special, fashion special, and Cindy Crawford walks in the room, and I'm just like, oh my God. And it was so weird because even seeing...
Cindy, how are you?
Hey, Cindy.
I lost your number, babe.
Yeah, funny. But no, she's like on the cell phone sitting on the camera case, and I'm like, oh, excuse me, Cindy, I need a lens. Can you hop up, please?
Yeah.
But they're just, it's just New York, and then also living in LA, there's just stars everywhere. They're just human, obviously.
Man, must say, I respect your attitude from the beginning when we started chatting, just the way that the whole communication went through to the moment that we finally met. Yeah. But now even more, because you didn't, I see a lot of people like trying to pretend that they were not privileged. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it feels like it's a thing to say, oh man, like it was hard. Like, yeah, it is hard. But like when you have a position of having privilege, it's nice when you acknowledge it.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that.
Oh, thanks.
But your next comments made me respect you even more, because you said you were always paying attention to your moves. Just that thing of being confident to come to a Hollywood star and say, hey bro, how's it going? How you doing? Hey. It's not that easy. So is it something that always came with you, or you clicked? You were like, I'm amongst people who can make things happen and I'm gonna up my game? Or it was just you being yourself? There was a professional thing there as well?
Yeah, interesting. I think it was just me being myself and just having fun, knowing I'm only in New York for a certain amount of time. So why not say hi to that person or whatever? But I was never like, can I meet you? And I'm a big fan, and can I get your number? And like, can I give you my demo? Or like, whatever. It's like my show reel. I wasn't trying to get anything. I was just kind of like, hey, cool to meet you, blah, 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 or whatever,
Nice.
They're just humans, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I remember like one night I was looking after like a French film crew, and we went in, when I was living in LA, and we went into like Hotel Chateau Marmont or whatever like this, where all the stars stay. And we were there, and it was like 2 a.m, and I was like, I was the sober driver. They were all drunk and whatever. But then Busta Rhymes and his boys come out of an elevator, and I just saw him, and I just like impulsively, I'm like, yo, Busta. He turned to me and he looked at me, and then I kind of froze, like, what am I going to say next? I was like, I saw you on concert, man. You were dope. And he's like, cool, man, cool. Like it was that simple, but I just had to say something rather than just like, oh my God, it's Busta Rhymes. It's like, why not say hi, So,
man, who would you say, can you tell me some names or some people that really supported your journey? There's always those ones that gave that opportunity, or trusted you, like that you highly respect in the industry, or not even like that famous, but like really showed you ways?
Good question. I've never really had like an ongoing mentor. Like I wish I did. There was actually times where I was like, God, I really would love that mentor relationship, and I never really had one that sustained. I mean, when I was third year in film school, I was in the Christmas break of university. There was an opportunity to work on a feature film, and it was actually an Iranian director called Amir Naderi, and he was like the top director of the time in the 90s, and he was making his first English language film in New York. And so I had the opportunity to work on that in the camera department. It was low budget, so it was like I was working for free. But I did it, and I developed a real relationship with him, and he kind of took me under his wing, and we remained friends for years. And I'd show him my student film, and he'd give me feedback and that kind of thing. So I had a taste of that then, but nothing in particular in New Zealand, to be honest. Right. I mean, I think, like I was surprised when I got approached to make Sione's wedding, because it was just like a phone call. I was making commercials and music videos, and John Barnett called me, who's the head of South Pacific Pictures, and he was like, "Oh, is this Chris? Oh, it's John Barnett here." And I was like, "Oh my God!" And it's
hey,
like,
John,
you were dope in that concert, man. And he, but he was literally like, "Oh, we've got a project that we think you might be right for. You should come in and talk to us." And he didn't really tell me, but I was just like this. And later, I kind of found out that Oscar Kitely had co-written the script and obviously was in it, but that he had seen all the music video work I had done, including music videos I had made in Samoa. So I think he thought I was the right fit. So I think he recommended to John that they should talk to me. And so I went in, and I remember the meeting where they slid the script across the table and was like, "We think you should direct this." And I'm like, "Wow." And they described to me what it was about, like 4 guys who are trying to get into a wedding, and it's set in the Samoan community in Grey Lynn. And my first response was like, "I'm really flattered, but don't you think you should get a Samoan director?" And they were like, "No, absolutely not. You're right for this. You kind of understand, you've got respect for the culture and an affinity, and you kind of grew up in hip hop, and your visual language is right, and this is a universal story. It's not a particular cultural story," and all of those things. And so I, nervously took the script home and read it, and was just like, my God, this is like my first film's being handed to me on a platter. But when I look back at it, like I had worked for that. It just ambushed me, like I'd done the hard yards with the music videos. But like you guys with the podcast, like you just do the grind because it'll lead to something. You just don't know what yet. And although I was nervous, I also felt ready to make a film. Like I didn't know it was going to be that film, but when I read the script, I was like, "Oh, we can make this really funny." And I felt ready. I wasn't like, "Oh my God, I've only made 2 short films. I don't know if I can take this step." I was like confident and ready to do it. So it was the right timing.
What's harder in your perspective as the director? Is it the horror? Is it the comedy? Is it the drama? Or it depends on the crew? It depends who you're working with?
Subject wise, I was really nervous about Sione's. I was really nervous about comedy, and I did talk to other filmmakers to try and kind of get advice, like older filmmakers, and they were like, and they did say, it was kind of like unintentionally put the fear in me. They're like, "You do know comedy is the hardest thing to make," and I'm like, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I remember that particular summer before we filmed it, I think we started in March, and all summer I was just like nervous about it. And then I was out walking the beach in Piha one day, and I just kind of had this breakthrough thought, which is like I was so worried about, how do I make it funny? How do I make it funny? What is funny? How am I going to make this funny? How am I going to know it's funny? And it's like, fuck, all I've got is my sense of humor. Like I can't make somebody else's sense of humor, and I can't, project what other people think is funny. All I can do is trust my instinct. And the boys are hilarious. So if I throw ideas at them or back at me and we collaborate, we kind of trust the process. And I do think, without sounding like we're kind of blowing a trumpet, but I think part of the magic of that film, and I think we all see it in films that we love, it's if people are enjoying the process, or if the process is authentic and enjoyable, it kind of sticks to the celluloid, or nowadays like the digital card. But it's like you can feel it in the film. So outside of the script and the jokes and the punchlines and the comedic timing of the editing, if they had a good time making it, you can kind of feel it. Like we all know movies like that,
Yes.
So I do think, I think the script was good and funny, but I think the film is funnier than the script.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
If that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Have you got something there, Pete?
We're talking about privilege and stuff. I think you were so driven though. Like you could be privileged. I still think you would have got to where you wanted to go because you knew what you wanted to do. You were so driven. I love that. Like, you knew exactly what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Hire a VHS, cut it the old school way.
Yeah.
You're always going to get there. I think privilege. I think you just got the natural talent. You had that creative brain. I think you're always going to get there anyway.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. No, I think if it's in you. I mean, literally. Yeah, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. I just didn't know how.
Yeah.
But I was lucky. I mean, again, like I said, it's kind of, you know, it wasn't wealth privilege. We were like middle class, but like what an opportunity. My dad was in New York. Like otherwise I would have been at Ilam and I still would have made films, but the films might have been different and my path and journey was different, you know?
Yeah. And what genre do you think is your favorite? Like what do you feel the most comfortable and what's your most excited thing to shoot in?
It's a tough one. I mean, rather than a genre, it's almost, I guess it's human stories at the end of the day. You know, like it's stories that are honest and authentic and vulnerable and they touch the audience and provoke conversation or possibly provoke action, you know. Genre-wise, if somebody was like, okay, pick your genre for your next movie, here's the money, I'd probably go back to comedy because it's such an enjoyable process. And it was interesting because I had a very, I guess, rare opportunity where I made Sione's Wedding. I made a romantic comedy and I made it as funny and romantic as I could. And then I got approached by the film commission. Actually, Sione's hadn't come out, so it wasn't even a success. It was just like I was editing it. And then I got approached by one of the development people at the film commission saying, hey, there's a psychological horror movie and we think you'd be perfect at it. And I remember being on the phone and I just like laughed and I was like, why? Because I'm making a romantic comedy? And they were like, no, you made this short film called Water. And it was kind of a psychological thriller, basically about global warming, but it was a 15-minute short film I made in 2000 and it went to Sundance. It was the same year that actually Taika had Two Cars, One Night. And so he was at Sundance too. So we hung out throughout that year and I mean, I was so broke. I asked to sleep on the floor in his hotel room. Well, it wasn't even a hotel. He got put up in an Indigenous filmmakers log cabin, and so it was full of Indigenous filmmakers from around the world, and I just couldn't afford accommodation. He's like, yeah, you can sleep on the floor, bro. And so I was like the token white guy sleeping on the floor with like Native American, Indian filmmakers, and it was amazing, amazing experience. Sorry, I went off on a tangent, but yeah, I think it would be comedy because when I made the horror film afterwards, it was a great challenge, and I guess I had always aspired to make films of different genres for the experience. And like Stanley Kubrick's one of my favorite filmmakers, and he has done all genres and nailed each of them. So I wanted that challenge, but unbeknownst to me, just how draining, kind of mentally and emotionally draining making a horror movie is, because directing horror and drama and fight scenes or, murder scenes, or even in Ferryman, there's a rape scene. It's like really confronting to direct that and support the actors, and it's challenging. And then you go into the edit and, you've got this like just tide of editing and sound mixing with like screaming and panic and chaos and murder. It was like a year of pretty dark dreams. And I'd watched a ton of horror movies prior to making it to really study the craft and suspense and timing and camera language and all of that, but I just kind of like oversaturated myself, and so when that was done, I was like, no more horrors. Just couldn't watch another horror.
And it's one of those ones like, if you don't get it right, it becomes the comedy, which is the last thing that you want, right? Exactly. You don't want people to laugh about a horror. Imagine going through a 1 year of bad dreams and people not enjoying it. So I guess there's the one as well, like there's the elements.
I mean, what if I snuck into St. Luke's and sat in the back of the theater and people were laughing? I'm like, oh, what have I done?
No. Man, and another massive one, the Panthers.
Yeah.
Beautiful project, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. It was, again, an honor to be involved,
Was it something that came from Sione's Wedding, like crew people that you met? And I also actually want to ask you about the historical part of it. Was it something that you already knew? Did you get to study more? Did it change your appreciation and, image of what the country is and how things are happening in the country?
Yeah, most of those things basically. I wasn't involved in the development of it, so I had heard that the project was in development. With Tom Hearn is one of the producers on it, and he had been developing it for years, and I'd heard about it, and I was like, oh my God, that's the most powerful story. And so I contacted him and said, let's have lunch or whatever, and I'd like to talk to you about it and just catch up. And I hadn't worked with him before, but we basically had lunch. And this is like probably 3 years before Panthers happened. And I went out to his place in Piha, had lunch, and I was like, bro, I just want to put my hand up. Like, it's such a powerful story. And I know it's, specific, especially to Polynesian culture and community and history, but I'd love to be involved in that story. And, I knew the premise of the story, and it was just a story that needed to be told. And so I just put my hand up early, and they... Yeah, basically when it came about, it was actually like about 2.5 years ago now, and I was deep in making Power Rangers, which could not be a more polar opposite to the Panthers. I was making for Netflix, like big, silly kids TV, but also really enjoyable in its own way. And then Panthers came into production, and I think, I don't think they were like, oh yeah, we'll use Chris from the get-go. Like, to be really transparent, I think they had a kaupapa of having like mostly Polynesian and Māori filmmakers and heads of department, we call them HODs, and just lifting up, like essentially a lot of crew and storytellers that haven't had a chance yet, which makes total sense. But I think with the experience that I had as a TV director and filmmaker and stuff, like Miki Magasiva did the first 2 episodes and did a beautiful job. He won an award for directing those. And then Tom Hearn and Vaya did the 3rd and 4th, and then I did the last 2. And it was amazing. It was just it was a real honor.
How cool to change directors, for a series. There's so much power in that choice.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of production and efficiency and economy, if they're shooting everything, because literally episodes were interweaving with certain locations, so it was a matter of having directors tapping in and out for their episodes. But I think one director couldn't have done all 6 episodes in that time frame. It just would have been too overwhelming. So more directors. And I think most TV series, like some of them, the showrunner will direct a lot of it. Well, for the most part, or they'll direct the first and last episode, but they'll get other directors in the middle. So they'll set the tone or do the first 2 or 3, and then other directors will do it. That's kind of how TV works, yeah.
And on the historical and the appreciative side of Aotearoa history and Māori and Pacifica, was it something that you tapped before as a younger person, or it was something that you developed your passion and understanding as you went overseas? How is your relationship with the history of Aotearoa?
Wow, another great question. It's interesting. I think in many ways because I grew up, like my dad's side of the family is Scottish, like, early Scottish pioneer, probably 5 generations or something. And then my mum was actually born and raised in Indonesia. So she's Dutch, but she always jokes about being a white Asian immigrant because she was in Sumatra and then basically immigrated to New Zealand when she was like 14. So she was white, but she couldn't speak a word of English. But essentially, I kind of grew up like most Pākehā as like European Kiwi, but we lack... and if you don't know, I guess you don't know, but because my dad was a diplomat and we grew up, like I lived in Bangkok for 3 years when I was a kid, and I just was kind of grew up on aeroplanes. I was so lucky to see so many cultures that I kind of developed this kind of cultural hunger, and I feel like it wasn't fulfilling, I couldn't fulfill it on my own. I wasn't raised with Scottish or Dutch songs or dance or anything in the way that, Māori and Pacifica culture do so well and have and maybe take for granted or not or keep it alive, but I just didn't have that. And then I think when I moved to America and I lived in New York for 7 years and LA for 1, I was kind of like this advocate for New Zealand, and there wasn't many Americans in the 90s in New York, so Americans would be fascinated, like, tell me about New Zealand, and I'd be, oh my God, blah, 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 and it was my film school friends used to tease me because I'd have photos of New Zealand landscape all over my flat, and it was like a tourism room, cool. So I was homesick. So when I came home, I think without even consciously knowing it, I gravitated towards, like projects in Māoridom and Pacifica culture because a bit like you guys being Brazilian, like you're just naturally interested and you're fascinated. So I felt like there was so much more depth in a lot of Māori stories and storytelling, albeit documentaries or anything. And I think a little bit also that influence on me in hip hop, because in hip hop it's predominantly brown in New Zealand in the 80s and 90s. And then, like Pākehā were kind of the minority for the most part. But one of the beauties of hip hop is that it's not about, race or gender or whatever. It's actually just about skills. Like if you're good at that thing that you pick, like I did graffiti art and I do massive murals, and, it's like if I had skills, then you get respect. So I guess I was intertwined into a lot of, Māori and Pacifica culture, even as a teenager, like running around, even though it was just doing graffiti at night, but hanging out in different houses and going, wow, the world is different everywhere, So I think that appetite developed at that stage, and then it was just kind of a natural fascination that drew me towards certain projects, like even my earliest music videos, I was in Wellington, so it was like Trinity Roots, and their music is so beautiful, and I wanted to tell their stories and do justice to the songs, and and similarly, a lot of hip hop artists are Polynesian, so it's like I'd step into those worlds, and then Sione's came out of the blue because of the work that I had done, so just always felt very fortunate for what I got, what I was able to make,
So it was really because of your upbringing. You were not just after the backstage pass and the free tickets to the gigs from the bands. You really liked the video clips.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up on rap music, so it was like my number one love, like I was banging Run DMC and Grandmaster Flash and Public Enemy, cassette tapes at school, and I was breakdancing badly, and like I just grew up in that.
Cardboard boxes, eh?
Yeah, and I think when I came back from New York and moved back to Wellington, like I reached out to, there were certain artists that I knew from Wellington, like Kapisi and Kaz the Feel Style and certain people, but like all the Aucklanders like Dawn Raid and P Money and Scribe, I cold called them and said, hey, I've just moved back from New York, and I did manage to make a hip hop video in New York, so that was kind of a bit of a calling card. But I think probably for the hip hop community, a lot of them knew that I'd grown up in it, so I knew the culture and respected it. So I wasn't like trying to make a hip hop video. It was like I was making a hip hop video because I understood the culture. So that was probably part of the natural progression. Yeah.
What's next?
Good question. Yeah. I'm developing some projects. It's hard to kind of talk about some of them. I've got documentaries that are specifically, I think I was really inspired with the Scribe doco. So I've got projects specifically in mental health that I really want to make.
Awesome.
And particularly surrounding suicide prevention, which is something I've always felt really passionate about. Yeah. And so crucial to this country. Like we need to talk about it and we need to help our kids, you know. So that's on the horizon, but not confirmed and not funded. But the immediate next thing, and actually I had a Zoom call today, is I haven't made a music video for probably 5 years, and I got approached by guys called LSD, which stands for Leonard Simpson Duo, and it's Leonard Charles, who's Jeremy Toy from Open Souls.
That's what it stands for.
Sure.
Leo, you're tripping.
Sorry.
So it's basically Jeremy Toy is the musician and he makes the beats, and then there's a rapper in Detroit called Guilty Simpson, so he's the S of Simpson, and they've made this song, and they've done this song called Bang Bang Boogie, which is actually about gun culture and gun violence, both there and here. And they've brought in The Movement, who's a South Otara rapper who's if you haven't seen it, just done this music video that dropped last week called The Lecture, which is such a powerful music video made by young South Auckland filmmaker Samson Rambo, and it's beautiful. Anyway, so the Movement is the Kiwi rapper, and the Guilty Simpson is the Detroit rapper, and they're both talking about it from their childhoods because they were kind of raised in that culture, and now they're older guys with this perspective on what's going on. So we had a Zoom this morning, and we're going to shoot the Otara sequence in like a week or two, and use that as a template, edit it together, and then share it with a remote filmmaker in Detroit and with the rapper to say, this is what we've done, can you match this in Detroit? And so I'll have to kind of direct it remotely and rely on the DOP over there, and then edit it together. But it's I haven't made a video in 5 years, so I'm feeling really excited about it.
Back into where it started.
It's awesome.
I was going to ask you about being a director, and work must be ebbing and flowing as a director because things bit of space in between. How do you get your creative mind looking forward to next things or keeping yourself busy? Because I know it's pretty hard.
It's very hard. No, I appreciate you asking. It's again, it's getting back to what we were talking about before. I think for all artists, if you're not busy or you're losing your sense of purpose, it's a really challenging place to be in, because you know, like, it's hard to be creative when you're worried about, you know, not having projects or not having income. I mean, I've got, you know, like, I'm a separated dad with 3 teenage kids. It's like I've got to pay bills and so if the work's not there, and the truth is last year and the beginning of this year has been really dry, like the worst in probably 25 years in our industry. And that's everything, commercials, TV, everything. And I think last year was an election year and it's post-COVID and, you know, like there's definitely a lot of economic hesitance globally. But it's, really, really tough. So I try to stay creative, but truth be told, there's been times where I've just felt really stagnant and accepted that I'm not feeling creative, even if I go, okay, I'm going to go and walk up the maunga and I'm going to listen to music and I'm going to think of a new idea and I'll go up there and watch the sunset and come back with nothing. And that's okay. You know, that's part of the process. But it's like just trying to keep active when you're not, and it is really hard. And I guess, you know, like you look at some of the great musicians and for them to be creatively stumped, like, you know, I don't know, maybe Lauryn Hill and D'Angelo are good examples. Like they did this amazing album and everybody goes, where's your next album? And then that pressure just makes them retreat and hide, and then they're like, they've gone into hiding or whatever. Like how do you lift that pressure off and just let projects flow, you know? And actually, Rick Rubin's got amazing, you've probably seen some of his stuff online, but incredible, you know, theoretical ideology around the creative process and not making something that you think somebody else wants to see, but making what you want to see, like make what the art that you like or you think is cool or profound or whatever, like, you know, just important. Be true to yourself, you know. So, but it's easy to say and harder to practice. So, I mean, you know, like, I think looking after your mind and your self-care, not just physical and mental or whatever, but even your creative self-care, like it's so important, and nobody teaches each other that, let alone we probably don't talk about it much, you know? Are you still bombing? Occasionally. Occasionally. I've got a couple of friends, old school friends that are actually Otis Frizzell even
he was really good.
He's amazing. We're similar generation, and although he was like white boy bombing in Mount Eden and I was the white boy bombing in Wellington, but he found a wall in Kingsland, and he said to me the other day he's created this brand called Old School Fools, and he's like bro, we got to get all the old school back and do some pieces, and I'm like, I'm totally keen, I'll bring paint. So, but the last few pieces I've probably done have honestly been like my daughter one year, she was like, Dad, will you do me graffiti for my birthday? And I'm like, sure, honey, do you want it on a poster or a canvas? She's like, really big canvas. I'm like, okay, you want your name? So my daughter's got a massive one in her bedroom, which probably gets her some cool points now. They're like, who did, you know, the boys come around like, oh, who did the graffiti? It's like, my dad. Your dad? You know?
Such an epic art form as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's my childhood as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Oh, awesome. Were you bombing in Ranui?
A little bit.
A
little bit. Probably not as good as you guys, but it was definitely what we used to do. Yeah.
Oh, we all started with bad tags. You know, like we were all amateurs.
Was that page as a tagging's still a thing now.
But I was also that era, like DLT was, his graffiti name was Slick DLT. So he was like, and he was like a few years older than me. Yeah. And also there was a guy, Frosty K, who was Cosmo from the Foot Soldiers, like the rapper. So he's an OG from Wellington. So he kind of, we were talking about mentors before, but he kind of took me under his wing. Yeah. And I remember meeting him in Manners Mall and going up to him and being like, oh, excuse me, are you Frosty K? And he's like, yeah, who's asking? And I'm like, oh, I do graffiti, I write Pharaoh. He's like, you're Pharaoh? Yeah. He's like, bro, we should go bombing. I'm like, okay. Yeah. You know? Cool. And so,
did you document any of your...
Yeah, I got photo albums. Yeah, I mean back then it was all wind-up cameras, but I've kept all my photo albums of all those pieces, and often I'll put the sketch in the photo album, like the hand-drawn sketch, next to the wall that I've done.
Cool.
So yeah, I've still got that.
Epic.
Yeah.
Man.
So cool.
I haven't pulled it off the shelf in forever.
Oh man, you should print them out.
We got our bro,
I'll send you some photos.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I'd love to see. Yeah, for sure.
We got our bro Nicola watching the show. Got a few people watching the show, and he says,
bro.
"Dibs on sound." And oh man, I think he was talking about when you were mentioning the video clips.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh man, that would be an amazing song and video." So yeah, man, we're looking forward to see what you're coming up with.
Yeah.
Shout out Nicola, our brother,
Yeah.
big supporter of the ALTBAYS journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man,
he introduced us.
there you go.
He's family. He's whānau.
Man, going back a little bit to the struggles of the industry at the moment and the government.
Yeah.
I want to link that up with what you mentioned at the start of our conversation with having the opportunity to go to a school that really supported the arts and your creative self. You know, like, how do you see what's going on right now with governments and so many changes and so many different approaches to education as well, and like what's priority and what's not?
Yeah.
There you go. I opened the can.
Did you hear me sigh? You know, I guess it kind of ebbs and flows. I think we were talking about this in the car before, you know, like New Zealand politically, it's always fluctuated, tends to be, the graph goes like the roller coaster is like 2 terms Labour, 2 terms National, and it kind of goes back and forth. But I feel like we've never seen a government like this, and I you know, like I'm really worried, but I'm cautious not to, you know, create you know, cortisol and stress about it. But so I keep it at bay, but I am really worried about it, and it's interesting because especially, you know, like I really think their treatment of Māori in particular and Māori culture is just extraordinary. But I think. I almost feel like I feel hopeful that we are still gradually evolving, that non-Māori are gradually becoming more open to Te Ao Māori and all of the benefits and everything that it can offer those of us that aren't Māori, and how we can embrace it and actually make a stronger and deeper country by understanding it and learning about it, you know. But I almost think that there's more of a the gap is less race. It's more of it's more of a wealth gap and a class gap, rather than it's like, oh my God, they're going to create a race war. It's like, I don't feel like that's going to happen. I feel like we're multiculturally pretty secure. And you know, a bunch of racists at the top can't change that, but they can definitely close doors and cause stress and a lot of suffering to huge amounts of people, you know, and that will have reverberations. But I think it's also strengthening and unifying Māori at the same time. I think Waitangi kind of showed that. That was like an insight into it, you know. But I do think there's a wedge of us and them, but I don't think it's a race wedge. I think it's a wealth wedge. You know, that's kind of how I see it. And I do feel hopeful that we will get through it, and there'll be a lot of anger and there will be some conflict and resistance, and all of that is probably evolution for each side, but and learnings that come from it. But I do feel hopeful that we'll come out of it stronger, you know.
Since last time you came here, Pete, things changed, eh?
Yeah.
Quite a lot. Do you follow it? Do you keep up with like politics and news?
I really try to, but sometimes I think it's situations that I can't really control. I don't want to get, like you say, I don't want to get stressed about things, and I try and just keep working hard and looking after the family and just doing my thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to talk politics because it winds me up.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. The country's definitely turning for a bit of a rough run for a little while. Yeah, it's really hard for people. Yeah.
Do you feel like it can close doors for a professional like you when you start to be vocal, or when you select the work that you do or the crews that you're part of? Not you specifically, but like in general, when media professionals have the thing of like, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to get involved. Like, what's your take on that thing of like, I'm going to be part of it, or I prefer not to? Do
you mean politically in terms of projects?
Yeah.
I feel like there's been so much evolution already that the wheels are already turning. So I think the government isn't necessarily a reflection of the stories that are going to be told. Like I know that there's been such evolution that there's Māori and Polynesian commissioners at TVNZ and TV3 that do a lot of decision making, and like the all the changes that have happened in the world that have opened up doors, especially for storytellers and filmmakers, both for women and, people of color, basically. It's like post Me Too, post Black Lives Matter, everything, everybody's going, it's becoming a more fair chance for funding and telling stories. I'm not saying it's just and balanced and equal, but it's improving. And I don't think, the government going, we're going to, change all of the Te Reo name places and this is allowed and kids aren't allowed cell phones or lunches or free transport. That's not going to necessarily change the stories that are being told or the passion of the storytellers within all of the arts, But yeah, I think the funding will take a hit, they may go, we're going to put more into, capital gains or whatever rather than the arts or whatever, like there'll be changes like that'll financially affect people, but it won't stop artists from telling stories,
Which takes me to another topic something else that we were talking before we started the show, which is finding these new opportunities, paying attention to areas that might be something that the younger generation are already there and we just can't see it because we're not growing up with it. They are. So how do you see this keeping fresh, paying attention to what's going on around you and using technology in your favor?
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like a dinosaur and I feel like I've missed it, Like I've got teenagers, they're digital natives and they're, they're on Snapchat and all the things, but they're not necessarily like, like they show me things that I don't necessarily know or understand. But I was the generation that shot on film and edited it and collaborated with everybody. So I call myself a director. I'm not like I'm a filmmaker. I do it all. And the next generation, not my kids, but like the 20-somethings and everything. But when the digital revolution happened to both the music industry and the film industry, and the 5D cameras came out and everybody's like, I can make stuff look flash with this cheap camera. And then everything became bedroom filmmakers, like the consumer mode of DaVinci color grading or Adobe Premiere editing, everything was there. So now you've got these film school graduates that aren't like, I'm a director, I'm a storyteller. They're like, I'm a filmmaker and they can do it all, So I saw that change and I definitely experienced the competitive outcome of this is how I work in the old school model, and these young guys are coming through being like, I can make that for half the price. And they do, and I lost jobs to that kind of thing, and it's still happening. Like I'm still kind of feel like I'm a bit on the back foot of a old school kind of mentality where I want to collaborate with cinematographers and editors and two minds are stronger than one and that kind of thing. But they're they used to call them like predators or shredders, like shooter, editors, producer, editor, shooters, like all in one. And those guys are out there doing it. And there's some amazing young filmmakers that are doing incredible stuff like that, But I'm still of that generation that values collaborating for storytelling,
Yeah, I often think about that. We usually when we bring musicians or people who are involved in the behind the scenes of music, there's always this thing with like the role of the producer. It's so important. So like we would have much more classics years ago. Like there was this thing of like, when you're working on an album, like there's a team there and the producer it's tailoring it. It's like it's helping the band to make that sound and create that identity or show them something that maybe they can't see because they're so involved in the music making kind of thing. Like they need that extra guidance. Yeah. And it takes me to what you're saying, like this flip in the positions, like now you can do it all, but maybe you would be benefiting from having a producer coming to your studio in your bedroom and saying, hey, we can turn this to something else.
Yeah, we can make this better.
We can bring more flavor to it as well, right? So I always wonder, like, I don't like when people criticize it when they go hard on it, because as you said, there's a lot of value in knowing how to do it all. It's cool. Like if you can do all the parts of the process, it means that you can be, you know, more specific about what you like or not. But you closing a door for the other mind.
Absolutely.
That will come with something fresh, maybe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think great ideas come from anywhere, you know, like, yeah, it's so collaborative. It's so important. I mean, when you're talking about that producer coming in, like Rick Rubin's a perfect example, you know, like his reputation was a band could be getting stagnant, like it could be the Chili Peppers or even Johnny Cash or, you know, whatever, and Jay-Z or whatever, he'd come in and they'd be like, oh, you should work with Rick Rubin. And he would come in and ask the questions, and then suddenly the Chili Peppers make a smash album and Johnny Cash makes Man in Black, and, you know, Jay-Z does 99 Problems or whatever. Like he just comes in, he's like the doctor that will challenge your process and mind to maybe make something that you couldn't make if you were just tunnel vision on your own, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, but I think great ideas come from anywhere, and I think as my younger, you know, ego fell away and I got more experience and more maturity, it's like I realized that a good idea is just a good idea, and somebody else's good idea might you know, spark an idea of mine that will make an even better idea than theirs or mine on our own, you know.
So does the crisis that it's happening now with TV channels, you know, like losing people are losing their jobs and it's shrinking the productions, from someone who's got an important role in these productions. Do you fear that? Do you see it as an opportunity for something new? Do you think these professionals will be migrating and maybe opening their minds to something else? How do you see what's going on?
I don't know. I mean, that's in particular, I think that's a reflection of the economic reality right now, like News Hub and TV3 making cuts in News Hub, like 300 jobs, you know, like it's a lot. And that's a reflection of like I guess, advertising changing. So probably advertising and sponsors and, you know, everybody's streaming. So there's all that change. I think probably a greater threat is probably AI, you know, like that's happening so fast. And as you guys probably know, and some listeners may not, but they released, I think it's called Soma a couple of weeks ago, like maybe a month ago, SOMA. And it's basically the same search results you do for a AI image, like, oh, you know, enter this and here's my description, and then pow, it's like a very accurate thing. It's a moving image version of that. So it could be like, give me an ant's point of view running through a Victorian street while it's snowing and the light is coming from the northwest or something. And then there's the moving shot, or a drone shot that flies through the keyhole of a door into the castle of the whatever. And there it is. So now it's like moving pictures AI. So that's extraordinary, and that will change filmmaking, and that is a threat because that'll take away jobs, you know, especially in fantasy and sci-fi and things that we can't necessarily shoot on location. But I think the thing that I love doing, and I probably, as I maybe get older in my career, I've gravitated more towards documentaries. I think I do enjoy making documentaries and human stories, and so the safety net of that for me is that AI will never be able to tell human stories and humans connecting, just like we are now, you know, like that human interface, or a director interviewing somebody and getting honest emotion and vulnerable storytelling and all of that, and the, you know, the sensitivity and compassion that can come in that storytelling, from the directing to the cinematography to the editing to the, you know, the completion of it. You can't say to AI, like, make a heartfelt whatever. It's like it'll be Hallmark music and cheesy whatever, you know, like it's still not human. So that's safe, but I do fear for a lot of other aspects of the industry, you know.
Isn't it interesting though how when you say, oh, especially for like animators and all that stuff, like they might lose their jobs, but like if you look at the timeline, it's so recent that they started to exist.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So like there's a funny aspect of that as well, you know. So I like to believe that there will be room for a different role, because even to ask good questions to AI, it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, like if you really want to get something good out of AI, it takes practice.
A few steps,
A few steps.
To shape it.
So I wonder like if some positions will actually get more recognition for being able to do specific things. I think we're going to have to face challenges to grow in that realm. I don't know where it's going to go and how it's going to be.
Well, even you talking about like, you know, it takes a few steps to do that description. It's like, oh, well, then you could get a really good a person that could write really well a very specific description. But then my mind just went, yeah, but then computers will learn how to do that. Like there'll be an AI program to go, I can do the thesaurus that you need or whatever, you know.
Am I too naive to believe that those things could lead the world population, whatever, communities to work less and live a better life? Like, am I naive to believe that AI could benefit the ordinary Joe, like the guy who is working 60 hours per week? Like, can we look at that on a more positive outlook, or am I being too positive?
I love your positivity.
I love your laugh.
we're both like, yeah. Hell no. Yeah. No, I love your take on it. And maybe there are upsides. It's worth looking at, like, well, how does this benefit us? But I mean, it seems like the essence of AI, the benefit of AI in its core is efficiency. So if the computers can do it more efficiently, then that means a loss of jobs. And then that means really the death of certain crafts or craftspeople, you know, artisan kind of, you know, craftspeople. Yeah, it's scary. I don't know.
I don't know. Like it.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going. And when I listen to podcasts about it, it like really scares me, because if they start getting into, you know, like the military side of it and, you know, like drone snipers and all of that, like it's one thing to go, oh, the creative sector in AI. It's like, what about human security? And, you know, it's not going to look like Day of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise with robots with guns running around. It's just going to look like a computer writing a code that blows something up somewhere, you know, like.
Yeah.
And we're so close, unfortunately. We can see already a lot of weird stuff going on. No humans involved, just the machinery. Just the machines going for it.
Didn't Google have they had a study of 2 different AI units talking to each other.
Oh, really?
And they ended up making their own language that they couldn't understand, and they were communicating with each other in their own language. Oh, so they had to shut them off.
Wow.
Yeah, because they were learning.
Because it couldn't be deciphered, so they didn't know how dangerous it was.
They didn't know what they were talking about. Had to cut them off.
Wow.
Did they know what they were talking about? Nah. don't wanna take the risk.
Oh my god.
Can't risk it. Can't risk it. We're in a dangerous territory.
Yeah, that's scary. That as you were describing that, it made me think of that film Arrival. Have you seen Arrival?
Yep.
You know, and then bringing in that special like linguistic expert to try and decipher the ink blots of the aliens.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's real crazy.
Yeah. I'd rather watch that stuff for some escapism fantasy without going like, oh, it's going to happen to us. Yeah.
Like Ready Player One, people living behind goggles, and Apple released their glasses and shit, man. No one's going to leave their garage soon.
Yeah.
Live in a whole different world.
It's funny, eh? Because even when you talk about like, oh, should I be up to date with the changes in technology or whatever? Like I don't have TikTok, for example. My kids are on it, but I don't. And I hopped off Facebook last year because I'm just like, these are just time wasters. I never went on TikTok in the first place because I just know it'll be a vacuum of another overload of information, which is a distraction to, you know, mental peace or rest, and that clarity is where I think imagination and creativity surfaces from. So if you're constantly distracted by data and information and you're scrolling and you're thinking about the person that you saw on their holiday or the thing or the ad for the whatever, it's like it's just creating noise pollution in your mind. So, you know, like I guess I'm a bit old school that I'm deciding not to embrace those things. I'm still on Instagram because a certain amount of self-promo is important, but it's like even that I just try and limit my time, and I'm finding that I'm happier on my phone less, so it's absolutely a necessity. And you know, like I obviously use it for my professionalism, and I respond to emails and texts and stuff quite fast because that's a reflection of my reputation as a professional. So it's got to be in my pocket, but I do notice that physical memory addiction, like somebody walks out of the room, I'm like, oh, I'll get my phone out rather than I'll just sit here and think. Doesn't happen much anymore. So even before this podcast, when you're like, oh, you know, like maybe you want to go for a walk on the beach, it's like it's beautiful walking on the beach. I was listening to a Sampha album and just like I was like, oh, this is so good. This is food for the soul, you know. And we need to almost prescribe ourselves that diet for our own balance and well-being, you know, like how much digital diet to have or not.
We're lucky we grew up in that era before this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel blessed now in retrospect.
For sure. Yeah, I feel sorry for these kids today.
Yeah, I know. it's so funny.
And I know we're on a podcast. I'll show you this photo, which is describing.
This is ironic.
Bring the phone up.
It is.
Yeah. God, Leo, what a disconnect guy.
I know, right?
Why? Just spoiled the vibe.
So I thought this is speaking at exactly what we're talking about. And those boys on a beautiful sunset,
wow.
staring at their phone.
Oh my God. Yeah. Did you take that photo?
I took that photo.
It is a beautiful photo.
And no one's looking at
I don't know if the camera can see
them.
that, but...
No one's looking behind them.
Can you see it? Yeah. Taylor is getting it.
Yeah, but they're all looking at their phones.
They're all looking at their phone instead of looking at that moment.
Yeah.
Did you tag them?
Crazy.
I don't know them. I just looked at them on the hill, and all of them were on their phone the whole time.
Yeah, but that's their norm, you know. Like I talk to my kids about it, and it's just like, I'm like, you guys just sit in your bedroom. Don't you feel like you're disrespecting each other by being on your phones? It's like, no, Dad, that's what we do. And then it's like, hey, check this out. I'll send it to you. Whatever. It's like, what about talking? And then, like I took my kids camping up in Patau and Whangarei Heads. My brother lives up that way, and we went up there beginning of the year, and my son's 12, and he's like, Dad, I really enjoyed not being on my phone, and he's really good at Fortnite, and it's like his jam, and I try and give it to him and, certain amounts and doses, but when he's not online, he awakens, like his spirit comes out, And
their eyes glaze. There's a little glaze to their eyes when they're gaming for too long.
Yep.
It's like...
Yeah, and the behavioural stuff too, like get off the game, and they've had if somebody crushed them on the game, then they sit down at the dinner table moody. I'm like, don't bring that mood to the table,
Oh man, I'm so thankful we lived in that world.
Oh yeah, and we're the first generation of parents to deal with this. So we're the pioneers of how much do we say doing this and that. And I've got certain rules. Like I think I'm pretty reasonable with the kids, but it's like dinner, put the phones away, like switch it into silent, no notifications, no beeping. I don't want to hear any Pavlovian sounds, Sit, eat, talk. After we finish eating, just sit there and talk until the conversation comes to a close. Okay, kids, I cooked, you clean up or whatever, and they do that. And once they're like, okay, Dad, I've cleaned up, can I go back to my phone or can I go back to my bedroom? I'm like, yeah, sure, thanks. And we've had our chat, we've had our family time, and the same in the car. Like, don't be scrolling on the car like I'm an Uber driver, like I'm your dad. Have a conversation with me, you know? And they get it, and they do those parts. But I know that they're also, they also that's their norm.
It is.
I have to accept it.
Question from the audience. Our bro Fauzi Hassan that I was telling you before.
Fauzi.
Fauzi's watching the show. Shout out, Fauzi. Thanks.
Hey, bro. Long time no see.
Yes. Is there a story Chris has not seen and would like to adapt into a film? Good question. Thank you.
Oh wow, great question. Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny when you say adapt, it makes me think of books and things. There have been a couple of books that I've read that I'm like, oh my God, that would make such an amazing New Zealand film. And I read the other day because Lee Tamahori's put out the Covenant, there was an interview where he had talked about he's been wanting to make Maurice Shadbolt's Season of the Jew. Do you know that book?
No.
It's set in the time of the Māori Wars, and it's I guess similar themes to the film he's just made. But I read that in my 20s, like when I was at film school. Somebody, family member, gave it to me. So surreally, I remember reading it on the New York subway every day, going to school and back. But it was just such a page turner. That would be one if you haven't read Season of the Jew. Like incredible novel. And then there was a book that I think the author is Craig Mariner, and he wrote a book called Stone Dogs about 15 years ago, and it's set in Rotorua, and it's about some fictional gangs and basically a group of bogans, like white bogans, that get tied up in a wrong drug deal with both the equivalent of the mob out there, like fictional mob and kind of fictional, not quite skinheads, but kind of, white racist gang, and they get caught up in the middle, and it's an incredible novel. And I that was in development as a movie for a while, but it never, and I had some meetings about it, but it never eventuated, and Film Commission never quite backed it, or it just, the project fell apart. But that's another incredible book that I read that, and I was just like, man, I'd love to. It's a bit like, it would be like a Rotorua version of Lock, Stock, just like epic, gritty, kind of street level, not gangster, but Kiwi slice of real life. There
you go, Fauzi.
Yeah, good question.
Man. Yes. Man, coming to the end of the show, I just wanted to ask something that we talked so much before we started, but it didn't come to the conversation. It came in different ways, but your relationship with drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Was pretty cool. I always ask the guests,
Sure.
like, oh, would you like a drink? You know, what are you having? And you said something cool about taming that a little bit, paying more attention to your relationship with alcohol, which kind of relates to mine as well. I worked with alcohol. I drank for a long time, and then Kiwis kind of put me off because you guys go hard. Like, we go hard in Brazil, but the go hard for a Kiwi is like go hard until you pass out. Started to put me off a little bit. And but what I understood was that if I was trying to fight that, it would not work.
Yeah.
So I tried to establish a relationship with it that, you know, we can work this out. If I'm king, I'll give it a go, but it's not a part of me. And it feels like you had something similar with your journey as well.
Yeah, no, I have recently, and I know we were all talking about it before. I guess in short, like I've never drunk too much. Like, I've never had a problem. I've always just been like a couple of drinks most nights, if not every night, and that was the regularity, because that is kind of habitual to our greater Kiwi character, as you say. It's like part of our culture. And it was interesting because when I was living in the States, like, people didn't drink that way, and I'd come back to New Zealand and I'd just be like, whoa, and it was so different. I could see the cultural difference, and it's always fascinated me. I've actually, like, I haven't made the film, but the first screenplay I wrote was actually about drinking culture, and it's called Drink, and it's about a couple of dialer drivers in Wellington that are going to different corners of New Zealand society and just seeing every version of what drinking culture does to different age groups and that kind of thing. Cool. So it's kind of like a dark comedy buddy movie, because it's two guys in a car like cracking jokes, but in quite a dark landscape. So I've always been fascinated by it. And yeah, long story short, during lockdown, or just prior to lockdown and COVID, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to drink on weekends. I'll try, I have more mental clarity during the week and get work done and be more productive and be more on point. And so I was drinking on weekends. And then when lockdown happened, I was just like, oh, this is a good opportunity to just not drink. And I thought, you know, we all thought lockdown was going to be a month or something. It was like months and months, and it went on. But because I was home, either with the kids or on my own, because I'm separated, so we had two bubbles and we alternated between there and their mum's house, I just didn't drink. And I just found the benefits of it. Like, basically the benefits of not drinking outweighed the benefits of drinking. And when you really look at, I mean, we drink habitually and obligatorily socially, but actually if you know, it was also, I mean, as I mentioned before, there was some years during lockdown where I had some challenges in my personal life around family, kids, myself, and everything was layered up. So, and also work, because I was doing Power Rangers and Panthers and everything was on. So I was like, got to be on point, so I'm just not going to drink throughout this project, and, you know, all of that. So, but all of those things, I realized that I could, how much of a depressive alcohol can be in your thought process, even if it's in the morning, and let's say you've had 2 or 3 drinks and you're not hungover whatsoever and you think it's normal. But I feel like when I looked at my challenges and worries and problems that I was trying to solve, they seemed kind of unsolvable, or I couldn't find solutions. But then when I was sober, I'd basically wake up and go, okay, what are my problems? And I'm like, okay, that. So, okay, what am I going to do about that? Okay, I'm going to try that. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to try that. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to try that. And then I'd have a plan, and I could just see it clearly and basically attend to it and usually tackle them, you know, rather than being defeatist and going, it's too hard. It all coincides with, like, you know, I was doing a lot of meditation during lockdown and just looking after my mental health. And so, you know, I geek out a bit on the depth of consciousness and reality and mindfulness. So I just find that when you're not drinking, that dulled filter allows you to go deeper into that stuff. So for me, I guess this is a very long answer, but the essence of it is reality is sharper and more enjoyable without it.
Was it a night and day change for you? Did it feel amazing straight away?
No, not I guess when I did a year, I was like, that wasn't hard. Yeah. This is better. Yeah. You know. And listen, I'm not. I think I said to you guys before, I'm not like I'm never going to drink again. Like I'll drink for a special event once every few months, like a mate's 50th or a big day dance party or whatever it is. It's like, you know what, I'm going to have drinks in the sunshine and I'm going to get my dance on or whatever. And it's like I choose to do that. But then for the rest of the time, you know, everyday routine and family life and dad life and work life, I'm a better human and I'm more creative and I'm a better dad without it, basically. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Now I'm just going to have the rest of this tequila.
What a cool show, man. Thank you so much for joining us, bro.
You're welcome.
Time flies, eh? When the conversation is good.
Yeah, I don't even know how long. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it, man.
Great to meet you.
No, it's really nice to meet you too.
Yeah,
Get some good creative energy. It was awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. No, wicked.
Cool, man. And as I told you before, the show is growing as we expand our networking, so we'll definitely invite you back.
Yeah, thanks. I'd love to come back. Yeah.
Bring the kids, bring the partner to have some fun in Fitianga next time.
Awesome. That'd be great. Yeah, we'll make a weekend of it.
Awesome.
That'd be great, Leo. Thanks. Obrigado.
Obrigado. Man, we didn't even talk about Brazil. See?
I know. You and I talked about it.
We did. Thanks, Pete.
No, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man. So just a heads up here. ALTBAYS wouldn't exist without our big supporter. So Barrier Air, thanks for flying the bro. And how was the flight? Was it all good?
Flight was beautiful. Yeah, it was a real treat. Once you get over the psychological worry about like I'm in a plane of 12 people and I'm like flying in a tin can above the ground. It's a smaller tin can than the bigger ones we're used to. But the flight was stunning. And honestly, banking around the peninsula and coming into Fitianga Beach was just like, I was right behind the pilot. So I was like this through the windscreen, like watching. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So shout out to Barrier Air. So if you are coming to the Coromandel and you don't want to drive, I hate driving. It sucks. So fly to Fitianga. There you go. barrierair.kiwi. We had them on the screen. So shout out Barrier Air. Also Bayside Motel, Bayside Accommodation. We had them on the screen as well. So if you're coming, you caught your flights with Barrier Air and then you go straight to Bayside Motel to spend a nice nights with those comfy beds. Was the motel's
great.
Well?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the bed. Yeah.
There you go.
It's all good. And the pizza, amazing.
And the pizza, because you're going to be hungry as well, because when you fly, you're hungry.
Yeah.
So you go to Bates Pizzeria and grab some pizzas from our bro, Henry. Pizzas were good, Pete?
I feel like I've experienced Fitianga Manakitanga.
There you go.
I just got hugged by everything. Kai, flight, accommodation, you guys. It's felt great. Thank you.
Bro. Thank you so much. Thanks to our supporters. And don't forget the beautiful Coromandel magazine. I have a collection here on the table. Look at this. Which one is this one? Issue 11, one of my favorite ones. We had our bro Roy Matatai Monaco featuring this one. So the Coromandel magazine, it's bringing stories from the Coromandel community to you, my friends. If you live here and you want to share your stories, hit us up, hello@coromandel.nz. And if you are a business owner, a smart one, you can advertise with us because the magazine is so pretty. It stays at establishments forever and ever and ever. So it's a good investment. We're going to have some tequila now. Peace.